Hey everyone, this is Two Drink Minimum, a podcast where we tackle various life topics over 2 beers at minimum. We are your hosts. I'm Janet.
And I'm Edwin.
And today we are going to be talking about fear and drinking Founders All Day IPA, which sadly we actually already just opened off camera. So you won't get that classic, opening of the can, but cheers.
I think you can still get it.
Nice. Yeah, we ran it in post. Nailed it. All right, so this is a session ale, and I love Founders All Day IPA because it's literally like our go-to budget craft beer that also just is really versatile because it's low ABV, so you really can, drink it all day and not really, get drunk or anything necessarily. I mean, if you drink enough of anything, you'll get drunk. But it's very like an easy, relaxed, low-key craft beer. And we can get it like in a 15-pack for like a fairly decent price. You bought the 15-pack, I don't know how much.
Yeah, it was 15, so...
Yeah, so, I mean, that's like cheap beer prices, but for craft beer. So I definitely really like this one. Do you have any comments on All Day IPA?
Yeah, it's a session ale. It's real great. Really great.
Super hoppy tasting.
Yeah, super hoppy. I've been drinking all day since I found it.
But not as bitter as some hoppy beers.
Probably my fondest memory, or most memorable memory of Founders All Day, I have a few. One was drinking it in my backyard when... like the gas company needed some help or something. They're like, I need access to this room. I'm like, I don't know. A few years ago. And then the other one was I drank a lot of them for my graduation. Mm-hmm. So I drank like pretty much the whole day. So I need the all day for real. And I just went in on it. I mean, I drank a whole bunch. Pretty much from the beginning of the morning till I went to bed. I even had it on my way to graduation. I had it in a thermos, just rocking it, and then I drank it at the after parties and stuff. It made my stomach hurt real bad, and it really stung. So the next day I had to drive to Iowa to go to your graduation, which was where Janet went to school. So I was so much in pain I had to lay down and like just stretch my stomach out because it hurt so bad. So good times. Those are my fondest memories, and I can definitely recommend Founders All Day for all occasions. Yes.
Yeah, glowing endorsement right there. So we're going to be talking about fear today, and kind of what that entails is we're going to break it down into 2 categories. We won't necessarily split them when we're talking about them, but just to kind of clarify what they are. So it's like literal fear, so things that are more concrete, like fear of spiders or clowns or, maybe like the ocean or something like that. That would be concrete, literal, and then there's also abstract fear, like failure or intimacy or, I don't know, other things that might be a little bit more abstracted. I'm not really sure. A fear of, dying alone, like stuff like that. Those are all abstract fears, and those are kind of some common ones that people have. And then we're also going to talk about our fears, like, our earliest memories, kind of like where we are now with fear, and ultimately how we overcome fear, or maybe even, if we have things that we still haven't overcame in terms of things we're afraid of, we can bring that up too. That's kind of going to be like the run of things. So starting with earliest memories of fear, Edwin, do you want to kick it off with some early memories?
Well, I have a question first. What is fear?
What is fear? I kind of just talked about it, but I guess to break it down a little bit further, I would say it's when you don't want to experience something because you have like a negative psychological and physiological reaction to it. Usually it's a level of, and we talked about this a little bit off camera, it is similar to like the feelings of anxiety where you feel like maybe your heart races, maybe you get sweaty, maybe like, there's like signs that you're afraid. And then it's also just kind of like that, kind of a sinky feeling, / a startling feeling where kind of all of your instincts are suddenly heightened. But then I also think like it doesn't necessarily have to be like a reaction like that, like how we react to jump scares and stuff. Like that's fear. But there's also like, I am afraid to do this because I'm worried. So I guess there's fear where it's like, oh my God, I'm like afraid, like, I'm watching a scary movie, fear. And there's also like fear, like, I'm fearful of what's to come, or kind of like, I think that kind of abstract fear usually stems from like a level of worry. Like if we think about the like dying alone fear, like you're worried you won't find anyone, and you're afraid of dealing with the worst case scenario consequences, I guess, would kind of be how fear plays out. And you want to add anything to what you think fear is?
No, I'm trying to understand it myself. wonder what Webster has to say. But all right, so cool. So I guess hopefully that helps everyone else out who maybe is confused. Fear is weird for me because I kind of don't think I have it. I'm sure once we go through this, I'll find some examples. So
would you say fear is not a factor for you?
It's not a factor for me. Shout out to Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
it's not a factor for me much. I have nervousness or I have worry, but fear, like I am scared, is something I feel like I don't really experience much.
Webster's dictionary.
Oh, you got the
Sorry,
Webster,
not
right?
Webster's. Webster. Merriam-Webster. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines fear as an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. It can also be anxious concern. It can also be like profound reverence or awe. Like, you know, when people say fear of God, it's like, you know, you hold that to such a high esteem that it like has almost a fear aspect to it. And also the reason for alarm, danger.
Okay, so yeah, earliest memories of fear. I guess, you know, if you want to go really negative, it's like fear of getting in trouble with my parents and stuff, my mom. We still don't. We never had a good relationship. So there would be fear of getting in trouble or getting yelled at and stuff like that. That's probably my earliest memories of fear. Yeah, that's about all I have to say on that.
Yeah, I had that fear too, though. It's funny, I didn't think about that until you said it. So that would be a fear. I know in our beer episode, which you guys can check back to, I think that was episode 2, we talked about like the original fear of like, you know, being an alcoholic and like falling into alcoholism. So that was definitely a fear that drove me for a while. And I guess did kind of, you know, if we talk about like the impact fear has, I mean, it did have an impact in my life. It wasn't necessarily a negative impact. And I kind of got over it pretty early in my life. You know, I would say I'm still obviously pretty early in my life. I'm in my still early 20s, almost mid 20s. But yeah, so that would be one. But earliest memories of fear. My earliest memories of fear. So it's funny when we said we'd do this podcast, Edwin's like, okay, you're good to go because you're afraid of everything. And it's true. I'm afraid all the time. I live in a constant state of fear.
You had fear this morning. You opened the door and you got scared.
It was so scary. I opened the door.
So you knocked?
And no, you didn't. Okay, I didn't hear you knock.
I did knock for sure.
That's fine if you knocked. I did not hear you knock. I woke up after my nap. It wasn't in the morning.
No, it wasn't in the morning.
It wasn't in the morning because I woke up at 4:20 in the morning and I started work and no one was around.
Oh, so
and when you answered the door, you said, I thought my knocking maybe woke you up.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So yeah. Anyway, that's kind of irrelevant. But yeah, so I woke up and I got out of bed and I guess I knocked on the door, but I didn't hear him because he knocks fairly lightly because if he knocks too loud, I get scared. So then I guess he knocked, but I didn't know he knocked. I opened the door and he was just standing there. It was like a horror film. So that's. And then
I heard you coming to the door, so I figured, oh, you heard the knock, you're coming to the door. What else am I to assume? I knock and you're opening the door.
Because that's kind of very reactionary. Like I'm kind of skittish, and I don't really think of that.
You were afraid a few minutes ago when you're like, oh, I didn't see you sitting there, even though we just said we're gonna record, and I'm going to your room to record.
He was like in
you're still surprised.
Little door thing. Yeah, I get scared easily, but I also think being scared, like easily scared, is a little. I mean, it's intertwined with fear, but it's a little bit different.
Those are, that you can call that scared or whatever, or just sensitive.
Yeah, I'm more like sensitive to like.
But you also have the fears of everything else.
Yeah, I got a lot of other fears though.
That's a small.
So many fears.
It's a small example.
Yeah. So my earliest memory of fear, as a kid, and I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast already. I was afraid of everything. Literally everything was horrifying, and I don't remember a whole lot from my childhood because I was really little, so like how much are you gonna remember? But literally, I mean, and I know this from memory and then also from people telling me about it. I was one of those kids that, this is kind of like not super uncommon, who was afraid of everyone they didn't live with. So I was afraid of my grandma because she lived in my house. I was afraid of my uncle. If someone came over to the house and they didn't live with me and I felt like I didn't know them well, I would literally go to my room. I'd like run to my room. I'd close and lock the door, and I would not come out until they were gone. And it was literally at the point, to the extent to which I would open the door and say like, "Oh, is he gone yet?" And then my parents would be like, "No, he's still here." And I'm like, "Okay," and I'd close the door, like super rude,
Not only that, you would like scream when the doorbell rang and would run to your room.
Yeah, I didn't remember that part.
Yeah, you wouldn't just like hear the doorbell and be like, "Oh, let me bounce." It was like, "Ah!" And then you'd run to your room, and we're like, "Come on, man! Like, why? It's like the 8th." And especially my uncle, I mean, obviously no one here knows because they're not our family. He would come every weekend to like watch sports and stuff, and hang out. So after like 3 or 4 weeks, it was like, dude, it's every Sunday. It's the same person. Like, I get, random.
Well, I never actually went out to hang out with him.
We would tell you who it was. You knew who it was.
No, I knew who it was. But I never got over being afraid of them.
No, you eventually did. I don't know how many weeks it was and months it was.
Well, yeah, at this point, I'm not afraid of my uncle Alfonso. Like, I'm not.
Eventually, you did, and I still remember that day when it was like she came out and you sat in his lab and stuff. We were like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah, well, you were a child. He's like, hey, see? So, finally not a weirdo.
Yeah, but yeah, so I was afraid of everything.
So it took you, if I had to guess, I would say like 2 months. So it's like 8 weeks in a row he'd come and finally yeah. I think on the short end it would be 4, but I'm way more comfortable saying it was 8 than 4 because he did it for a while. I was like, dude, this is ridiculous. Like, it's the same person every time. You've seen him. I've seen you not run away from him a couple times, like at a barbecue or something, So it's like, clearly, like, why are you still running when I'm telling you who it is? You know who it is, and you're still like.
How old was I? Do you remember?
Oh, I would say you were like, well, if you're running and stuff, you had to be like 3, 4, something like that.
Yeah, because I don't think I was at school yet.
No. You were past those kinds of things.
Which, oddly enough, first day of school, I didn't have any fear for that. I mean, it's because I'm always a nerd, but like, I saw the kids all crying and stuff. And I'm like, it really ain't that deep. Like, I don't know. But yeah.
So
that was my first memory of fear.
Yeah, so I have trouble with fear because, like I said, I don't have too many memories. I don't feel like I experience it much. I mean, we'll get into some other ones where maybe I do. But yeah, same thing with school. Like, I just never understood why people were scared of. Like, I'm like, your mom's not here. Like, who cares? Like, And I started crying. I was like, oh, this is really weird. Like, and it wasn't like, it didn't make me scared. I was just like, this is weird. Like, why are people like that? I'm like, okay. And people are just crying. And I'm just like, all right. Yeah, I wasn't at all worried or cared that my parents were going to be around me all day. Like, I didn't look at my parents, especially as a child, like, oh, it's my superhero. It's like my everything, my world. I'm like, it's just this annoying person that bosses me around. And they kind of get in the way of my stuff. Like, people don't know, so I'll just share it. But, like, my mom was, like I said, we never had a good relationship. But it wasn't just that. My parents were always kind of like, stay in your room and be quiet. Like, they didn't want me to play or do anything. So they, like, try to trap my creativity. But they couldn't, as many of you know. I'm a musician. I'm doing these YouTube stuff and doing podcasts and everything. So I'm just creative. And I was always creative from the jump, Like, that nature versus nurture, I'm definitely maybe, like, I guess I wasn't that born this way, even though these are the two people who created me. So I was fighting that. So when I went to school in kindergarten, it was like, oh, great, the annoying people are gone. And not like I was happy, but I was like, I'm definitely not like scared. And then I'm like, why are you crying? Like, they're going to be back at 3. It's like 8.
1:45.
Yeah,
actually.
so I'm like, this is like 4 hours. You've never been away from your parents for 4 hours? They weren't like, I don't know, at the other side of the house and you just didn't see them for 4 hours? Like, it's not really that crazy. They're not
maybe
gone.
they didn't. I don't know. It was very, the way we were raised.
So
like,
if you were a kid who cried when your parents left you at kindergarten, leave a comment below and let me know about that experience. And maybe you're laughing about it now, or you're like, actually, it was very traumatic. I was my dad's everything. I was a little princess, and now I'm like, well, if I'm your little princess, why am I not with you?
Oh, that's so sad.
So, yeah, let us know, because I definitely don't understand. Even now, I don't understand it, but maybe when
I think that comes from, like, fear being inherently irrational for the most part. I mean, obviously, like, there's exceptions. Like, obviously, if something scary is happening, once again, scary movies, or you're in a car accident and you see it's gonna happen, you're
maybe
afraid.
Our kindergarten teacher looks weird or something.
So there are reasons to have, like, experience fear, and fear is beneficial, in terms of, like, evolutionary speaking, because it's like, oh, it lets me know that I kick it up into high gear because, like, danger is happening, but in our modern era, usually when we're talking about fear, it's like stuff that is kind of irrational or whatever. So I guess jumping into then, like, current and, like, recent fears, and once again, these aren't, like, maybe Edwin will come up with some fears. I don't know. Maybe he won't. But driving. I'm afraid to drive. I've never driven before, and I still don't know how. And I need to learn how to do it. But at this point, I'm definitely down to learn. I just haven't been able to, like, get the money to take classes, because I think I'm just going to do it via classes. It'll just be easier and more consistent. But I still definitely am afraid to do it, but I do know at this point I will do it. But I also have the convenience of I'm not doing it yet, so I can just kind of not deal with it. But I will have to deal with that when the time comes. My big fear with that is, you're in a fast metal box, and I'm worried I'm going to kill myself and others. So I don't know.
Just drive slow.
I mean, the thing is, there's bad drivers everywhere all the time. I could just be one of them. It's not that deep. Like, it'll be okay. But, yeah, it does scare me still, the idea of doing that. And I've been behind the wheel before for, like, like a day or two. Like, my dad did take me on some lessons at one point. It was crazy. And, what I feared is true, but you'll get over it with time when you learn. Yeah. But I didn't have any perception of distance. And that freaked me out because I felt like I couldn't do things right, which is fine if there weren't other cars on the road, So, like, I did it mainly in the park, but, where there's no one around, there's no, like, risk. It's early in the morning. But that also had me go down a street as well. And I think I blacked out the memory. I know I kind of did it to some degree, and no one died. I didn't hit the car. I didn't crash it, or maybe I never got to that point. But I remember him. I don't remember if we did it or not. I'd have to ask him. But I do remember him talking about it, and the idea of it was horrifying. I'm not sure if we actually did test it out. And it wasn't anything, if we did, it wasn't serious. It was literally like a one block and then turn at the light, and then you're back in the safe parkland, which is nice. But yeah, that's basically the big thing. I felt like I didn't have control over it. And I think, to a degree, that's kind of where fear stems from. Like, you don't feel like you have control of a situation, or that you can't do something, and that you're being asked to do it, or you're in a situation where you need to do it. So that's a big one I have. Obviously, get startled a lot. Debt. I don't know if this is, like, so deep of a fear, but I have, like, some level of fear towards my debt. I don't really let it, like, dictate much of my life, but I am kind of like, when am I going to get out of this? And by the time I do, who even cares? Like, I'm just in so much debt. It's actually not even that much money, but I just haven't been, I've had the debt for so long, and it's never gone away, so I'm like, well, this isn't looking good. So I definitely have a fear of that. And then something I'll talk about a little bit more in depth later, scary movies and scary video games are still kind of difficult for me because I'm just generally like a very skittish person. So I do kind of like have a fear of those to the point where I don't really partake that much, though that is kind of changing a little bit. And we can talk about that when we get, more towards the end and discussing like overcoming fears and things like that. But yeah, those would be like my current recent fears. As a kid, I also really feared failure. Like when I was 7 or 8, I had like a distinct memory of fearing failure. You'll remember this from when I did Little League. And I would never swing. I would just stand there. And the reason I would just stand there is because I was worried I was going to misjudge the ball. And I guess deep down, maybe I thought that would make me look stupid. But honestly, what looks stupider is this dumb bitch standing there for the whole season.
We were yelling though every time, swing the bat, swing it.
Yeah, it was fun. I got glasses the next year, and maybe part of it was that I'm like, how can anyone see this thing coming? Because everything was blurry. Because I did get glasses like the next year, and maybe that was why. So yeah, I did once hit the ball on a bunt, and it went really well, and I got the game ball that day. And my dad says, see what happens when you swing? And it was a metaphor for my whole life. Why are you laughing?
My favorite part about Little League is you would stand there. You weren't the only one who was like that, by the way. Anyone who watches Little League baseball knows it's the worst. I've never watched basketball or soccer, but I'm going to guess baseball's the worst. And the crazy part was, or the funny part now is that, so you weren't, like I said, you weren't the only one who's that bad. You probably were the worst because literally they didn't swing. Some people was like, well, they barely ever swung, so, only marginally better. But one of the funny things is you'd be standing there, and if the ball was like really high, really low, and you wouldn't swing, they'd be like, good eye.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, bitch, she doesn't have a good eye. She's not going to swing even if it's going right up the middle. Yes, that particular pitch was not a good one to swing at.
I remember one time one of the coaches on the opposing team was like, it doesn't matter how you pitch it, she's not going to swing. And I didn't. I stood there, and I was like, he's right,
Well, the thing is, especially in baseball, that's why I think it's so hard to watch.
Oh, my God.
So you have to throw a strike still. They're not going to call it if it's a ball. So that's why that makes that game so hard to learn as a kid. Because if if you have a bad pitcher, I mean, game over, right? Like, pitching's what it's about. So if the pitcher's just, can't find the strike zone, well, then you're gonna it just keeps going. That's why they have run limits and all that. So yeah, that was funny.
So yeah. Okay, so that's my
current
fear recap.
Current fear, like I said, I don't think I really have many.
Maybe you should not have agreed to this topic.
Probably worry.
Okay,
you can call worries fears. Like, I worry about things sometimes.
Okay.
It just sounds funny. Like, I worry. Like, okay, everyone worries.
Well, everyone experiences these feelings.
Yeah, like
we're all human beings, or so I thought.
We're a simulation, so human beings, a concept created by our computer god guy or girl. So yeah, like I guess I have worries like same thing like the success thing. It's not actually no, I'm not gonna say that back. I really don't have that fear.
Yeah, I don't think
I would say there was a time, and this is true. There was a time probably when I started my journey in like kind of fixing my whole life that I did have that fear. Like I was like, what if like I remember like the week before school started, I'm like, what if I'm actually dumb? Like I know I feel like I'm not, but I haven't actually tried school, and this time I will try. What if when I try, it's not really that different? And the truth is, I'm not bright. Of course, if that turns out to not be true, and that's not how it works, but that was kind of a fear. Or I remember I was so obsessed because I'm trying to get my life back together. I feel like this is my last shot, which is crazy. I was 21 or something, but it felt like that at the time. It's like, well,
can you briefly mention like what you mean by that? You don't have to tell the whole story, but just like
I mentioned the thing before, but basically I had to.
Never know who's listening for the first time.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so I'll give you the quick bullet points. Was a horrible student, didn't go to school, cut class, drinking, smoking, The only thing I didn't do is I didn't really do anything criminal. So my record was totally clean. There's no record of me. I never got arrested or in trouble with the law. So, for that, I'm fine. But as an actual person, it was all garbage. Then I worked a regular job, and it wasn't satisfying. It was just an entry-level job. And then, around 21, after a couple years of doing that, I'm like, man, this is not it. And then I finally decided I'm going to shape up. And to shape up, I looked at my passions, and mine's music and piano, and I decided to go back to school to study that. So I had to go to community college because I had no GPA, like none. So I had to go to the community college to do a few years of that while I'm working full-time because I have bills and cars now, debt that I've also accrued. And, I had to do that big climb. It took me 6 years to do community college, 4-year university, and be out in the real world again, like in a way I wanted to be. So it's like it was a 6-year journey. So at the beginning of it, I was definitely worried. I had definitely a fear of being dumb, fear of the failure, and I had to kind of, like I said, it's more of a worry or fear, however you want to word it. But I was always obsessed with what if, even though I'm doing the right things, okay, now I know I'm smart. What if I'm putting them eggs in the wrong basket? And I shouldn't do the music thing. I should do something else. And that freaked me out for a while, and I was really like, oh man, I could really mess this up. So I was very worried about it. And of course, all that's turned out to be fine. It was just, you just gotta be patient and do the work. But there's always that doubt. And I guess now my fear, and this one is kind of a fear, I guess, or again, worry or concern or whatever, but I'm running my first marathon in 9 days.
That's definitely fear. Yeah, I feel like these are
11 hours.
Because fear, once again, especially going back to the dictionary one, it is the worry or whatever.
Yeah, so I have the worry of, it's my first one. My family has a bunch of runners. Janet's a runner. My dad's the OG best runner.
3 marathons he's done?
Yeah, he's done 3 marathons. So I have a fear of, if I fail this. No one's ever failed a marathon because he's tried it 3 times. He's done it 3 times. He's had successful runs, varying degrees.
Maybe the first.
Yeah.
The pioneer.
01, So I definitely have a fear of that because I've done my training, but as many people know who train for marathon, you don't actually run that distance. You run close. You run like 20 of the 26. Different training programs might recommend 21, 22, but no one really recommends the 26, especially not for your first time. So that day, there's always that risk of those miles, and then you can have a bad day, and there's just like a lot of things that factor. You could get injured, like you just don't know. So I definitely have a fear of that. Right before we started the podcast, I showed Janet I'm going to the Chicago Bank of America Marathon, so they have an app and everything's very, very nice, and they have a countdown clock right away when you open the app. Just a little countdown clock shows up, and it shows you down to the second, when it's going to start. And I looked at it and I was like, man, this went from like a fun thing like 2 weeks ago. I'm like, 17 days, and I'm like, it says 9. Yeah, and it's going to say 8 when I wake up, so, and then 7 the next day.
I'll tell you about the weather.
So yeah, then I even checked the weather. I'm like, 40% chance of rain in 9 days. You know.
By the time this episode goes up, it will already have happened a while ago. So we'll see.
Either put finisher or failure right here. I assume that I'll be. No, this is crazy. Looking back, I assume I'm gonna finish it, and it's gonna be fine. But definitely a fear or worry. I mean, I did everything right, and even though I did everything I could do, I'm where I want to be. I'm where I am, and it's fine. There's still that fear. So yeah, and I guess I gotta tackle that fear just like I tackled the other ones. I didn't let it stop me from the other things. I just said, hey, I'm worried about it, but it's something I have to work through, right? Because I want to run the marathon and I want to get my life back together. So I had to just work through that fear. Steve Harvey once said on the Harvey Show, "Face your fear, and your fear will disappear." And I really believe that.
You're really killing it with the quotes, the quote integration today. Nice. Yeah, I think that definitely counts. So that's why I'm like, I get maybe not having a lot of fears, or maybe not really thinking about our fears, because I think, especially for you and me, for the most part, we still do the things that we're afraid of. So I think it's easy for us to detach from identifying, like, this is my fear.
Yeah, that's
even
my problem.
Even like my debt fear, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take care of it, but it is kind of like
And even if you don't.
That's my fear, that I won't take care of it, Not that that'll kill me or anything, but it's something that I don't like, and I'm worried that, will never be resolved. So yeah, even though I have stuff like that, or even like the driving one, it's like, I guess the driving one's the closest one for like...
like a legit, like, I'm scared kind of feeling.
Yeah, and one that I've kind of, to some degree, avoided for that reason. I mean, it's also, like, I always cite the practical reason of, like, well, I wasn't going to have a car anyway, so I kind of didn't want to have to, like, learn and then relearn later. But really, it's mainly because I was afraid of it, and it was kind of, I didn't really need to do it, so who cares, right? But eventually I would like to drive, and I do eventually want to move to LA and learn to the, like, fears stuff. I guess talking about, like, overcoming fears. Yeah, we can kind of talk about that and, like, what it takes to overcome those, because, like, I think at least I still have some fears that I haven't really, like, tackled yet. Like, the driving one's the main one that I want to get to, that I haven't really done, and don't have, like, concrete plans to do yet. But some fears I've had. One recent example that I kind of mentioned to you before we shot the podcast and we were brainstorming for the episode was, like, this fear that I had of, I went to work out in the park, and this exercise I wanted to do involved, I don't know the name for the exercise, but it's where you, like, jump onto, like, a block or something. And when you're doing it in the park, they recommend that you jump onto, like, a park bench or something equivalent. But I'm, like, really small, and I never had a good vertical, really. So I was kind of like, well, I don't really want to do this because I think I'm going to, like, bust my shit if I try to jump onto this bench. And, I was trying to do it, and it was kind of like a rainy day, too, so the bench was kind of wet. There's a lot of reasons I could just, like, pass on this. So I started by just, like, testing it out and, like, just trying to do it while still holding on to the bench, and then trying to do it with, like, in these different ways to kind of get myself ready and, like, psyched up and, okay, now, it's kind of like, and I think you see that a lot when people are taking on, like, a fear that's, like, physical. They're like, okay, 1, 2, 3, go, and then they don't go, and they just, like, stand there, like, again, like, count me down from 5, count me up from 2, and they kind of make it this big thing, and I was kind of doing a bit of that, and then, at a certain point, I was like, okay, well, I recognized that I was experiencing the fear, and the fear was stopping me from doing this thing, and it was down the road going to stop me from ever, like, being more fit in that specific category, or being able to jump higher, and being, like, having that additional strength and, I guess, like, coordination and stuff. So I was like, okay, this is something I want to be able to do. I think it'd be cool to be able to do. And I'm not going to be able to, like, make these jumps if I can't practice them, because that's how you make it. You have to do it over and over again. You can't replicate that in any way. So, finally I kind of realized what I was doing, and I'm like, you know what, I need to just go for it. If I, like, slightly stumble or fall, it's not that big of a deal. It's not from a large height or anything. So finally I was kind of able to psych myself up and do it and make the jump, and I made it a couple times, and I put it on my Instagram story too, or on my Instagram in general when I did it, because I kind of wanted to, put it out there and be like, here's me doing something that I'm afraid of, and, and talk about the feeling of the success of that, even though that's, like, a super tiny example. But I feel like, sometimes too, especially if you're like Edwin and maybe you can't really think of, maybe you don't have these big crippling fears, which would be ideal, right? I hope that most of you guys don't have things that you feel like are impeding your life every day and are, like, really prevalent in your life, because that's negative. but you know, it can happen on a small scale, and you know, if that's the case, then you have to just kind of recognize when that's going down and then address it and move forward. And when you do it, you know, it feels great to just be able to accomplish that and say, like, yeah, I like took on fear, right? Fear is not a factor for you, basically. And that's just one recent example I have, but you know, I have others, but I figured you could talk about maybe how you overcame the you know, your college fear and stuff like that. I know you kind of just did it, but like, what was that like?
Well, those kind of fears, you just gotta suck it up, man. Like, you gotta remember why you see, I didn't have a fear like stop. It was a fear like, oh man, it would kind of suck if I fail, but it wasn't like a fear like I don't want to try because I might be dumb. It's just kind of like potential saltiness, more so than like, oh, I'm worried I'll fail. I'm not worried I'll fail. I'm just really hope I don't, because that would be really bad for me. So it's a little different. But anyway, just trying to figure out how to overcome fear. I would say when it comes to those types of things, it just becomes like, what's the alternative? You know, you're not going to do these things. For example, like my fear of there's no second guessing for me, and that's the thing where I struggle with. For me, there's not a second guessing of should I run the marathon? Should I drop out? No, like I do those things. Like I'm not a coward, and I think that's the thing. You don't want fear to. The thing is, here's the thing: don't let fear make you into a coward. That's it, right there. Because so many people, that's what happens, right? They just see a tough obstacle, and they see the things, and they worry what people will think or what people will say or what the consequences of a bad result would be, and they let it take them over, and then they become cowards because like, oh yeah, I wanted to run a marathon. Like, well, why not? And it's like, there's not really a good reason. Like, you know, and then it's like, well, maybe this year is not a good idea, but why not next year? You know, and then you don't have an answer for that. You're like, well, maybe. It's like, maybe, like, you're not gonna fall ass into the fucking marathon, you know, if you don't run. So you're gonna have to be conscious about this. It's like okay. So that's what happens, right? Kind of like your driving thing, right? It kind of reminds me of you gotta be prepared for things. One of the seminars I had, they're like, as a musician, I still don't have this, but they're like, you need to have a suit, tuxedo, all your dress clothes, everything you ever would need. I have everything except a tux. I don't have a tux, like a literal tux, because they're like, the last thing you want is you get a gig for like $200, which isn't a lot, but it's decent. But you need a tux, and then you're like, oh, I gotta buy one. Then you're like thinking, well, is it worth the money? Like, just buy the things you need, and then you don't have to worry about it. And it's kind of the same thing with you with the driving thing. You're waiting for the opportunity when you're gonna have to drive. That's not the best. Now you need to come up with the money. You need to learn it, and you need to be able to execute it at a level where you're required to drive on a regular basis. That's like not how you should just know how to do it, and then just have to, you know, it's like the kind of tux thing. Now I gotta run out last minute, buy a $500 tux for a $200 gig.
Well, you don't have a tux either, so you can't talk to me.
Well, I can't talk to you because I'm showing my fault and showing it in yours and saying let's fix it.
So when you buy your tux, then?
I'll buy in the next 6 months if you start driving, but again, you're not gonna do that.
I don't know if I have the money to do it. If I have the money to do it, I will.
I can't carry you like that. Anyways, the point is.
Well, I didn't say you had to pay.
Well, you're over here saying about I was just showing you an example.
Well, I probably will have the money to do it. Yeah. Fine, all right.
I'm only missing. That's fine. Yeah, I'm only missing one. I got every other pair of clothing gear.
The mine's way harder, but you don't have to do anything.
I would disagree. I think it can be free if you wanted it to.
It can't.
And two, driving sweat. Tuxes are. I gotta get sized and everything, but you know it's fine.
All right, in the next 6 months, what would that be?
If you know where to get the cheapest tux in Chicago or online, leave a link in the comments below.
A good driving school that isn't a scam.
So drive, you pansy. That's what I was gonna say. Face your fear and just get behind the freaking wheel. Borrow a car.
I'll take Megan's keys right now while she's asleep and just go for it.
Go, yeah, man.
Face the fear.
Yeah, face the fear, man.
Yeah. All right, that's exciting.
So yeah, so exactly. Same
reason,
right?
At least we accomplished that today.
Yeah. So anyway, cool. Don't let fear. That's just one of my things. I just think of what the consequences, what the long result is. Are you just gonna be this person who's always like all scary about stuff?
Yeah. I like that phrasing.
And then you don't want the fear to make you into a coward. Because what happens? Then you start living your life in
like a defense mode almost.
Not only that, you're already in the worst case scenario. For example, this might be a tough analogy, so I'm gonna try to be careful and slow when I say this, but. I used to play a lot of fantasy football I haven't played this year. It's my first year out.
You've already lost me. No, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not only that, this might get complicated, but
Yeah.
basically, the goal of fantasy football, obviously, besides winning and like pick the best players, and you don't have to know much about sports to know that. But the like real meta part is you want to get players at a higher. You want to draft players that you believe will outperform where you draft them. So in other words, if you get a 6th pick, you're like, oh, this is a good draft pick because honestly, I think this person can be a 2nd round pick. So you just want to get better value than what it is, right? It's like an investment. So what you want to do is make sure you're kind of drafting in that way where you're picking people who are going to be really good, and then near the middle and low end of the draft, that's where we find out who really knows football. Because you're like, oh, this person's undervalued compared to the market, and I'm ahead of the curve. And I know they're going to be here, blah, 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 and I'm going to watch them overperform, right? Mm-hmm. What you don't want to do in fantasy football is the reverse, where you pick someone who you're like, oh, I think this guy's a hidden gem, right? He's like, he's going to outperform. But I'm so committed to that I draft him way earlier than anyone else because I'm scared that someone else will take him, right? You're like, oh, he's really going to, he'll probably be there in the 5th round, but around round 3, you're like, you know what, forget it. I just really know he's going to be great because what you've done is you set the standard where if he is not that, you really messed up, right? You've decided you overvalued him and you also let that be represented in your decision making, and now you're in the worst case scenario. If he's what you say it is, you broke even. Because he's a 3rd round value, and you got him in the 3rd round, so it matches. And if he underperforms, you really messed up because he actually was a 5th round. You were wrong, and now not only were you wrong, but you invested high. So it's the same thing with like your fear. You don't want to be like, oh, I fear that I'll never, the dating one you mentioned. I'll use that as an example. You don't want to have a scenario where you're like, oh, I fear I'll be alone. I'm super, super, super picky. So I am alone, and it's like, well, you're already living in the worst case scenario. So what are you afraid of? Go out there. You're already in the screwed up place. You fear driving? Guess what? You're already not driving,
I don't fear, but I fear the result of driving. I fear crashing. By not driving, I don't crash.
Right, but you're also missing out on those other experiences.
Oh yeah, for sure. I just mean that
yeah.
like
right, yeah.
Not to be like super nitpicky, but I'm like that's not always a one-to-one.
That's what people always do is the life hack. They're like, well, I'll just avoid the problem instead of getting the benefits of it. Well,
but it's
right?
just that some things, like, I guess either way, when you avoid problems, you're missing opportunities.
It depends. Like, if you fear getting stabbed, that's a completely different thing. You don't want to embrace getting stabbed. But when it's fearing something that is kind of quote-unquote normal or is a beneficial aspect of life, you need to address, well, why? What can you do? Because that's important. You should know how to drive. You should know how to, pursue your dreams in my aspect and go for what you want. And if you really want to run a marathon, you should be brave enough to do it, even if there's challenges. So when there's a fear that's like an actual, like, I fear, tigers and stuff, you don't really have to embrace that. You can kind of say, okay, that's something that I have and I have to deal with it in the world,
Yeah, it's like you're hanging out with tigers a lot.
Exactly.
Though,
But there might be a kid who likes it and you have to deal with your fear and not let it impede on others as much
it's surprising how, I try not to do too much of this, where I'm like coming up with examples from other people, because I feel like then you're just talking about other people and it's not really as meaningful as when it comes from you. But it reminds me of how, like, one of my friends, and I mentioned this to you before, she's afraid of mascots. Like like, there'd be like, like in a game and stuff, like in the big animals, like
like Benny the Bull and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, like it creeps her out. And, it's kind of random and irrational.
The gorilla from the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah.
He's really awesome.
But that's scary for her. And normally that doesn't really matter because whatever, even if you're at a sporting event, it's like, well, I mean, Benny the Bull's like 80 feet away. I mean, maybe I'll get a little spooked if he comes near me, but
look at your popcorn.
It's not gonna, like, it's not that deep for her, so it's whatever. But even, like, I mentioned that, we went to Disney in the You Need a Vacation podcast, and one thing she mentioned was, like, oh, are there, like, mascots walking around everywhere? Because I don't know if I could go to Disney if there were mascots everywhere. And it's like, that's, an example of...
Yeah, it starts to hold you back.
Sometimes you'll be surprised on how arbitrary a fear can seem until it's, like, unavoidable or feels like it is impeding you.
Yeah, and you have to decide which ones, and honestly, you should, in an ideal world, we're not afraid of anything, and we don't let any fear stop us from doing what we want to do. Because if you want to go to Disney, if you want to go to Disney, you shouldn't let fear of heights or a fear of an airplane or a fear of traveling away from home stop you.
Yeah.
I've this is a little bit off topic, but I've in as we record this, I would say I don't have anxiety in any real way. But a couple years ago, I suffered from it really bad. and I was getting help, and I was listening to podcasts. I was just getting all the resources I could to try to help myself. And one thing they said is,
same.
You shouldn't let anxiety dictate anything. The person's concept was, they would get questions. It was like a podcast just like this one. They were like, oh, well, I want to go to college, but I fear my anxiety is too bad, and I can't. They're like, I don't give anyone any directions where anxiety wins. No, if you want to go to college, then that should be it. If you need help, if you need blah, blah, if you need to take less classes, whatever, maybe you can't travel to a big school because of that. Even that they would push back, and they push back a lot on that stuff because they're like, you're letting anxiety win. You're saying, you're already in the worst case scenario. My anxiety is too bad to go to college, period. It's like, well, then you already lost. You lost.
Yeah.
Anxiety won. It took over.
Whenever you start, like, organizing your life around, things that
your shortcomings.
I guess that's a good phrase. Like your shortcomings, your own, like, you kind of start. Well, whenever you start imposing limitations on yourself, that's a problem
that you ideally don't want to have, because this person wants to go to college,
right?
And if your friend was like, "It sounds fun from what you said," but they're just looking at the negative, which is a big aspect. There are a lot of mascots, but it's like, well, if you would like the food, you'd like a vacation, you'd like to see the world because you like those movies, then yeah, you are holding yourself back here. Yeah. And you have to figure out, how to work through that. What if you end up having a kid who really, really wants to go, and now you're like, and you're like, you're holding back other people now, and it's your thing. And people will be respectful, but at a certain point, you get in the way of your own enjoyment or your own stuff. You start hating yourself in a weird way, where you're like, I just hate that I'm like this, and it's like it starts becoming heavy. Yeah. Whatever that fear can be.
So I think really the goal with fear would be to obviously with abstract fears, because fear is useful for like as a danger, but
yeah, fear is good. It shows you're doing something great. When I got that fear,
you're aware of stuff and alert.
When I got fear, I have fear of. I try to do things that are fearful. Like I try to do things that I'm like, I don't even know if I can. I don't know if I can do this marathon.
Yeah.
And it pumps me up. I'm like, I'm excited. It's gonna be really hard, and that makes me excited. I like doing things that are hard. I'm a jazz musician, so.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like, and we've talked about this before. Once again, kind of off camera, and I think it's something we'll come back to in the future. So I won't go too deep on it, but there's this thing in education called, once again, I won't try to get too technical, but it's called the zone of proximal development, which basically means like where you learn, where learning happens, the place where you grow. And it's like, 3 circles, it's one big one and another one and then another one within that. And it's from this guy named Vygotsky. It's like my favorite thing in education because I think it works so well and I think works for life. And basically, it's like that you want to be in the zone of proximal development, aka the place where learning happens. And where it is the the smallest circle is like the stuff you know. The like learning zone is like the stuff you can do with help, and then the thing outside of that is like the stuff you just kind of can't do and that you're not ready for yet. And I feel like fear is often sometimes in that like kind of learning zone or that experience zone, because it's that whole outside your comfort zone. Like there's always those sayings that are like, or the cheesy inspirational posts online that are like, this is where growth happens and where like, adventure and new experiences happen outside of your comfort zone. I think fear has to do with and that kind of is what fear is. Fear is discomfort, and it's obviously it's kind of an extreme version of discomfort. It can be, if you especially get those like, deep emotional feelings about it and you start to physically react to it, and can be severe. But you want to be able to like take that on, because like when I do something that's scary, it's also can be thrilling, right? Kind of like roller coasters. Some people are really roller coaster junkies, and I consider myself like a big coaster fan, but I'm still afraid when I go on them. Not like really deeply, not to the point where I don't feel like I want to go, but I'm kind of like, when you're going up with that like little clink, I'm like, oh my God, oh man. And then it's like, I always do the hands up, because when I was a kid and I first started riding roller coasters, Edwin always told me, you gotta put your hands up, and I'd be so afraid. I was like, I didn't, he's like, you gotta do it. He'll like, because we'd ride together sometimes too, so he'd like, grab my arm and be like, yeah, we're putting our hands up.
Now I'm like mixed on the hands up. Sometimes I put it up, sometimes I'm just lazy. I'm like, it's
fine. I usually put them up, but it's hard because it's scary. You want to not, but it's more fun when you do. So yeah, like that's just kind of, I kind of got a little bit on a tangent there, but yeah, like doing things that are scary are some of the best things that you can do, and I do try to like embrace my fears and take them on so that I can like live my fullest life. One small example I have, because I think sometimes it's so easy to go back to career and other stuff, so I kind of want to go a little bit off that for this one. But I'm afraid of horror movies and horror games. And that's because I'm really skittish. So I'm like, oh my god, the thought of watching something that's intended to be scary. Like, I'm already scared when I turn the corner and Edwin's just standing there, like, completely normal.
I was sitting there.
He'll be like,
I wasn't even standing there. I was sitting there.
You know, Edwin's doing laundry, but I don't
wasn't
see
even
him.
at a point blank range. I was like 5 feet back from the blind spot.
I mean, it's fine, but like, I'm easily scared, so I'm like, oh, I can't do horror.
I'm showing how easily scared you were. I was 5 feet back, sitting down in a room I told you I'd be in.
Yeah. I mean, that one wasn't that scary, but it was a little scary.
You know, it's scary enough for you to like, oh, you scared me? I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah, I'm scared all the time. But yeah, so I'm like, oh, I can't do this. This isn't for me. And once again, right, I imposed that limitation on myself. But then I was like, you know what? I want to be able to do this. Like, the last horror movie I had watched in my whole life was Amityville Horror when I was a kid in like 2004 or something. And I hadn't watched another horror movie since then, basically, for the longest. And then I watched, you know, Get Out, which is a thriller. It's not really horror. So I kind of started to, well, I'm going to go into more horror stuff. But, you know, it's a thriller, so it does just have, like, scary elements to it. So I'm like, okay, this is, like, a starting thing. And then, you know, I watched It, which isn't that scary of a horror movie, but it still is, like, designed that way. And I want to try to do more stuff like that, because I'm like, you know what, I'm probably missing some really good movies. And it's, you know, a genre that seems interesting that I want to dive into, or at least be able to do. I don't want someone to say, oh, this is a great horror movie, and I'm like, oh, I can't watch it, because I don't do horror. And same thing for games, especially, you know, being someone who writes and reviews games, or writes about games and reviews games and stuff. I want to be able to be more versatile, and, you know, not playing horror games definitely was holding me back, so I kind of just agreed to it, even though I didn't really want to at first. Like, I did some, and they weren't like that scary, but I did some light horror games, and I'm like, oh my god, and it was stressful to play and really intense, but, you know, the more I do it, the kind of easier it becomes, and now I can do it, and I feel like it's not holding me back anymore. Does that mean it needs to be my favorite? No, not necessarily, but at least now it's like, this is something I can do, and that I can experience, and that I can speak to, instead of being something that I just reject before I even have reason to, you know?
Yeah.
So then should we just wrap it up then?
Yeah, I guess that's
okay.
So this concludes our Fear podcast. Boogity boo! Just kidding. Did that scare you? How do you feel about that? Leave a comment below about fear, and is it a factor for you? How is it a factor for you? Why is it a factor for you? And how will you overcome it in the future?
Yeah, and thanks for listening /watching, and we will see you guys here next time. Bye.